A 73-year-old grandma shot her grandson in cold blood. This horrifying murder was captured in a gut-wrenching 911 call, where you can hear the grandson begging for help as he's being shot, right before he dies. The grandma claims it was self-defense. But was it really? Imagine if your sweet old granny turned out to be a cold-blooded killer. What was going through her mind as she pulled the trigger, firing bullets into her own grandson? And how terrifying would it feel to have a bullet tear through your body? Chilling, isn't it? Let's dive deeper into this haunting story. Let's dive into the case of Jonathan Hoffman, a 17-year-old who recorded his own murder while pleading for help on a 911 call. At just 17, Jonathan was living in an upscale area of West Bloomfield, just outside Detroit, Michigan. He was finishing his senior year at Farmington Central High School and had plans to attend Eastern Michigan University. Family and friends described Jonathan as funny and kind-hearted, always ready with a joke and eager to help others. He was also super smart and tech-savvy, even building computers from scratch. A future next Michael Dell, maybe? But here's the twist. Jonathan was famously low maintenance when it came to clothes. He stuck to white t-shirts and gray sweatpants, saying he wanted people to know him for who he was, not what he wore. Kinda giving Mark Zuckerberg vibes, right? Except, well, Mark has leveled up his wardrobe a bit more, Jonathan's future looked bright, with his whole life ahead of him. But then, everything took a dark turn. 2011 was an incredibly tough year for the Hoffman family. His parents, Michael and Jennifer, were going through a divorce and decided to move to Arizona. But tragedy struck when their younger daughter, Jessie, was diagnosed with a non-malignant brain tumor, requiring a month of hospitalization, 3 surgeries, and intense rehab sessions. According to Jonathan's dad, Michael, Jessie's recovery took up almost all their time, leaving Jonathan feeling lonely and missing his friends back home. So, when his grandma, Sandra Lane, invited him to stay with her until he finished his senior year, his parents agreed. Sandra, a former schoolteacher, lived in a condominium in West Bloomfield. Sandra and her husband, Fred Lane, had 5 children from previous marriages. Jonathan's mom, Jennifer, described Sandra as a doting grandma who loved spoiling her grandkids. So when Jonathan moved in with her, his parents felt reassured, confident he'd be safe and well cared for. Sandra even tried convincing Michael to send Jonathan back, promising she'd take good care of him. "Don't worry, I'll make sure he's comfortable here and happy with his friends while he finishes his senior year," she said. But what happened next? Well, here comes the plot twist nobody saw coming. And no, this isn't your typical story of a sweet grandma baking cookies and hugging her grandkids like in those feel-good commercials. Oh no, this is a whole different level of grandma drama. On May 18th, 2012, around 5:30 p.m., West Bloomfield Township Police responded to a chilling 911 call from Jonathan Hoffman. In the call, Jonathan reported that his grandma, Sandra, who he had been living with for a few months, shot him. His voice was filled with agony as he begged the dispatcher for help. But what happened next? Let's just say, it's the kind of scene that makes even seasoned officers shudder. When officers arrived, Sandra ran toward them with her hands raised, shouting, "Asterisk, I killed my grandson." Asterisk, no, this wasn't a Hollywood thriller, though Sandra certainly had a flair for dramatic entrances. She then led the officers into the house, where they were met with a grisly sight: blood everywhere and Jonathan lying unresponsive on the floor with multiple gunshot wounds. Nearby was a 9mm Glock semi-automatic pistol and 9 spent shell casings. Apparently, Grandma wasn't aiming for a warning shot. Jonathan was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he was pronounced dead at 6 p.m. An autopsy revealed he suffered up to 9 gunshot wounds to his chest, abdomen, and left arm. However, some sources claim the number was actually 5 or 6, so the exact count is a bit murky, but either way, it's not the kind of grandma-grandson bonding you'd expect. Sandra, now on trial for murder, insists she acted out of fear for her own safety. In the panicked 911 call, you can even hear the gunshots that ended 17-year-old Jonathan's life. Now here's the question. Do you believe Sandra's story, or do you think there's more to this grandma defense? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this case has you shook, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories. Amazingly, Jonathan managed to call the cops while he was being shot. And the real shocker? The person he identified as the shooter was his own grandma. When the recording was played in court, 74-year-old Sandra Lane cried, but not exactly in the "sorry I shot my grandson" way. Cops say she shot Jonathan 5 times, and when they arrived, Sandra walked out the front door with her hands up. Guess she thought being transparent was the best policy, though this is definitely not the usual way to greet guests. Jonathan had been living with Sandra and his grandpa for a few months, attending an alternative school after running into some legal trouble. News of Jonathan's tragic and violent death rocked the community, especially his family, who couldn't wrap their heads around why Sandra did it. Let's be real. What could drive a grandma to do something like this? Was she trying to teach him a lesson, or did she just snap because he wouldn't stop complaining about slow Wi-Fi? Back in 2011, amidst all the chaos in his family, Jonathan started experimenting with drugs, especially synthetic marijuana known as Spice or K2. This caused a lot of conflict between him and Sandra, who probably longed for the days when his biggest rebellion was skipping his bedtime. At one point, Sandra even called the cops, claiming Jonathan was acting aggressively toward her. When officers showed up, Jonathan reportedly yelled and acted disrespectfully, like he was auditioning for the role of angsty teen in some drama movie. But when they tried to arrest him for disorderly conduct, Sandra stepped in, saying she'd handle it herself. Who needs cops when Grandma Sandra's ready to play judge, jury, and executioner? Later, she told her husband she was scared of Jonathan and his friends. Oh. When Grandma's scared, you know things have gone way off track. Maybe it was time for some serious intervention, not whatever solution Sandra had in mind. In March 2012, Jonathan reportedly tried hallucinogenic mushrooms for the first time. Unfortunately, these weren't the kind that give you deep spiritual insights. Nope, they sent him into full-blown panic mode, so much so that he ended up calling the police. Imagine this. He's tripping hard, suddenly decides the cops are his personal superheroes, and when an officer shows up, Jonathan, completely overwhelmed, hugs the cop. Like, full-on embrace, as if the guy just saved him from a burning building. Was it his way of handling the bad trip, or just a really intense need for a hug? Either way, he was taken to the hospital for treatment, charged with possession of narcotics, and sentenced to 93 days in jail with 2 months of probation. So yeah, the mushrooms gave him both a spiritual journey and a legal journey. Double whammy. After Jonathan's death, police found synthetic weed and other substances in his room, and tests revealed marijuana in his system. Sandra, on the other hand, had her own wild version of events to share. She told the jury she brought a gun upstairs to Jonathan's attic bedroom because, and I quote, "I wanted him to listen to me." Talk about taking tough love to a whole new level. Apparently, their conversation escalated into a heated argument, maybe over which streaming service is superior or whose turn it was to take out the trash, and Jonathan allegedly got aggressive and attacked Sandra. Despite being shot several times, because that's definitely calming, right? Sandra claimed Jonathan still managed to chase her around the house like some action movie villain who just won't die. Eventually, she hid in the basement, maybe to catch her breath and think, what even is my life right now? A few minutes later, Sandra went back to Jonathan's room to check on him. Maybe she thought the drama wasn't over yet. Their argument flared up again, and once more, Sandra pulled the trigger. Grandma wasn't just done with the conversation. She was done in the most extreme way possible. Let's be real, this wasn't your typical grandma bakes cookies and spoils you kind of story. Nope, Sandra took discipline to a level nobody asked for. When asked why she kept shooting, Sandra gave a painfully honest answer. I don't know. A truly profound response, kind of like when someone asks, "Why are you eating pizza again?" And you go, "Because it's good." Sometimes there's just no logical explanation. She also admitted that she was still scared. Whether it was fear of Jonathan or fear of public backlash, honestly, this case leaves you scratching your head. Adding another twist to the chaos, Sandra's husband, Fred Lane, made things even more complicated with his statement. Fred, called as a prosecution witness, casually dropped the bomb. "I had no idea my wife owned a gun." I mean, wouldn't you be shocked if your wife suddenly went full Rambo? When asked about his reaction, he said, "I was very surprised." So not only was Fred blindsided by the incident, but it seems he also discovered his wife had a new hobby, one that's slightly more intense than gardening, shooting her grandson. Fred also mentioned that, despite Jonathan's issues, Sandra never wanted to send him back to his parents. Even after Fred suggested it, she insisted on keeping Jonathan. She was determined to take care of him, even though I told her to send him back to his parents, Fred explained. Looks like Sandra preferred being the dedicated grandma over avoiding family drama. But then Fred revealed something intriguing that happened about an hour before the tragic incident. After returning from Jonathan's drug test, Sandra told Fred to take the dog for a walk and that she'd let him know when to come back. While Fred was out walking, he heard fire truck sirens. So now the question is, was Sandra planning this all along? Or was it just a crazy coincidence that she sent Fred out and then all hell broke loose? Either way, it seems like Sandra had a flair for drama. She could have made a great producer for a crime show. The trial lasted about 2 weeks, like a never-ending reality show episode. During that time, the jury listened to Jonathan's heartbreaking 911 call, where his grandma, Sandra, coldly shot him over and over. Prosecutors made it clear to the jury that, even though Sandra claimed she was scared of her grandson, she never tried to run out of the house. She didn't even bother calling an ambulance to help Jonathan. So was it fear or more of a "hold on, let me handle this myself" kind of vibe? Sandra claimed she pulled the trigger after Jonathan attacked her. But the nurse who examined her after the arrest reported that Sandra didn't have a single injury. So if Sandra felt attacked, maybe it was just an emotional distress kind of attack because she clearly didn't get hurt physically. What's wild is that even after the incident, Sandra spoke lovingly about Jonathan, like a sweet grandma trying to remind her grandson to behave, but this time with a gun in her hand. Sandra's defense team worked overtime trying to make her case, asking the jury to see the situation from the perspective of a 74-year-old woman taking care of a troubled teen who used drugs and brought strangers into her house. Maybe she just wanted to spice up the family drama, who knows? The defense argued that Sandra felt scared and believed she had no other choice. But let's be real, that choice turned out to be pretty fatal. But the jury wasn't swayed by Sandra's defense and found her guilty of second-degree murder. When the verdict was read, her husband broke down in tears, maybe realizing he'd just become the star of one of life's worst soap operas. Meanwhile, her daughter described Sandra as a monster and begged the judge for the maximum sentence. If there were a punishment beyond that, she probably would have said, "Yeah, I'll take that too." Sandra Lane, ever hopeful, pleaded with the judge to sentence her to just 3 years in prison for second-degree murder. 3 years? She must have thought this was some kind of end-of-year clearance sale at the local thrift shop. But Jonathan's mom, who's also Sandra's daughter, wasn't holding back. She urged the judge for the harshest penalty possible. Sandra Lane is pure evil. If given the chance, she would kill again. She has no remorse or conscience. All she cares about is herself, she said, clearly unimpressed by the whole 3 years suggestion. When it came time for sentencing, Judge Denise Langford Morris didn't mince words as she echoed what the jury had already been thinking. If Sandra Lane truly felt threatened and scared, why didn't she call the police? And why did she shoot Jonathan, a 17-year-old boy, so many times? Maybe Sandra thought the call police button on her phone was just for signing up for credit cards or redeeming discount coupons. Sandra was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison for murdering her grandson, plus an additional 2 years for using a firearm. So that's a total of 22 years, long enough to binge every Netflix drama series ever made. As the sentence was handed down, Jonathan's mom seemed satisfied, flashing a smile that practically said, "Finally, my mom gets to enjoy her retirement in prison." Later, she told reporters she was glad her mother would spend the rest of her life behind bars. The rest of her life in prison? Maybe Sandra can start a course on Surviving Prison 101. "I'm just relieved she's locked up now and can't hurt anyone else," Jonathan's mom continued. "Now she can sit and reflect on all her bad decisions. Maybe even brainstorm new ways to control situations, but this time without a gun." When asked how she described Sandra Lane before all of this, Jonathan's mom didn't hold back. "She's always been a thorn in my side, honestly. Difficult, meddling, controlling, I never liked her." So it sounds like Sandra wasn't exactly the grandma with candy type. More like the grandma with control issues type. What do you think about this case? Do you believe Sandra's story that Jonathan attacked her first? Or maybe think there's something else hidden behind all this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, because who knows, there might be a plot twist in there. And don't forget to hit that like button, because we all know you want to, and subscribe for more thrilling content. Because hey, who doesn't love a little family drama with a dash of mystery, right?